In a small dusty village near Kaduna, there lived a young girl named Amina. Her life was full of pain and silence. After her father passed away, her stepmother, Zubaida, treated her like a servant. She burned Amina's clothes, called her cursed, and told the whole village that she brought bad luck. Amina wore torn rags, ate leftover food, and slept on the cold mud floor. But inside her, she carried a quiet strength that no one could see. Every insult, every cruel word only made her heart stronger. One day, Zubaida told everyone that Amina had stolen her gold jewelry. The villagers believed the lie without asking questions. They mocked her, avoided her, and called her a thief. No one stood by her. Still, Amina said nothing. She didn't fight back, didn't cry in front of them. She just kept her secret close, something her late father had taught her before he died. Each night, while the world slept, Amina would whisper his words in her heart, "Truth may hide for a while, but it never dies." She believed that one day, the same people who called her cursed would know who she truly was. She didn't know when or how, but she knew the time would come. And in her silence, she waited, not for revenge, but for the truth to shine brighter than the lies that surrounded her. One evening, the quiet village of Kaduna was filled with panic. A huge fire broke out at the local market. The air was thick with smoke, people were screaming, and everyone was running to save their lives. The flames grew taller, eating up stalls, baskets, and everything in sight. In the middle of all the chaos, Amina heard the faint cry of a child. While others ran away, she ran toward the fire. Her heart pounded, but she didn't stop. She saw a small boy trapped under a fallen wooden table, crying for help. Without thinking of her own safety, Amina pushed through the burning debris. The smoke made her eyes sting and her hands bled as she tried to lift the heavy wood, but she didn't give up. Finally, she pulled the boy out and wrapped him in her ragged scarf. Her clothes were burned, her skin covered in ash, but she carried the child through the flames until they both reached safety. People gasped when they saw her come out of the smoke, coughing and shaking but still holding the boy tightly. That boy, they soon realized, was the son of the village chief. Amina collapsed, exhausted, while the villagers gathered around in shock. The next morning, instead of being praised, Amina faced new pain. Zubaida, her stepmother, stood before the villagers and shouted that Amina had started the fire herself to look like a hero. The crowd began to whisper, some believing the lie. But then the little boy spoke up. His small voice cut through the noise as he told everyone how Amina had risked her life to save him. The chief's eyes filled with tears. He walked up to Amina, placed his hand on her head, and said, "This girl is no curse, she is our blessing." The village fell silent. For the first time, everyone saw the truth shining through Amina's ashes. The chief was deeply moved by what his son said, but he also wanted the truth. He ordered a full investigation to find out what really caused the fire. For days, the villagers watched as men searched the burned market, asking questions and gathering clues. At first, no one suspected Zubaida. She pretended to cry, saying Amina had always been jealous and troublesome. But slowly, the truth began to surface. One of the traders came forward and said he had seen Zubaida near the market before the fire started. Another confessed that Zubaida had been secretly running an illegal business, hiding stolen goods behind her stall. The fire, it turned out, was her attempt to destroy the evidence before anyone found out. When the chief heard this, he was furious. The same woman who called Amina cursed was the real criminal. The villagers couldn't believe it. Shame filled their hearts as they remembered how they had treated Amina. The chief called a meeting in the village square. Everyone gathered, their faces full of regret. Zubaida was brought forward, her lies now exposed. Amina stood quietly beside the chief, her face calm, her eyes steady. The chief announced before everyone that Amina was innocent and had shown more courage than anyone in the entire village. He declared that she would be honored for saving his son's life. From that day, Amina's story spread beyond the village. People from nearby towns came to see the brave girl who faced fire to save a child. The government sent her gifts, and the villagers celebrated her heroism. Yet, Amina never spoke about the pain she had lived through. She didn't seek revenge or pity. Her silence spoke louder than any words. It carried grace, strength, and quiet power. In that silence, people finally saw who she truly was, not a cursed girl, but a soul strong enough to rise above cruelty and prove that truth, no matter how long it hides, always finds its way to the light. A few days after the truth came out, the village was visited by a group of journalists from the city. They had heard about the brave, mystery girl, who ran into the fire to save the chief's son, and they wanted to meet her. When they arrived, everyone in the village pointed them toward Amina. She was sitting quietly under a tree, helping some children read from old torn books. The journalists were surprised to see how calm and humble she was, even after everything that had happened. One of them asked, "How did you learn to read like this?" Amina smiled softly and said, "My father taught me before he died." They were amazed. Amina spoke clearly, her words gentle but confident. She read a passage from a book with perfect understanding, and the journalists couldn't believe that a girl from such a small, forgotten village could speak and read better than most teachers they knew. They soon learned that before Zubaida married Amina's father, he had secretly taught his daughter every night by candlelight. He told her that education was light, and no one could take that light away. Even after his death, Amina never forgot his lessons. She practiced whenever she could, reading old papers and teaching herself to write with charcoal on pieces of wood. The journalists decided to record her story. They filmed her simple life, her small hut, the children she taught, and the kindness in her eyes. When the video was shared on television and social media, it touched millions of hearts. People couldn't stop talking about the brave, intelligent girl from Kaduna who had faced cruelty yet never gave up. Within weeks, her name was known across the country. Letters, gifts, and visitors started arriving in the village. Amina had no idea that her story, once buried in pain, was now inspiring the world. She didn't chase fame, she only followed her heart, and the world followed her light. One bright morning, the village woke up to the sound of cars driving in, a rare sight in that quiet place. Government officials had arrived, dressed neatly and carrying cameras and folders. They came to see the girl everyone was talking about, the brave and intelligent Amina from Kaduna. The chief welcomed them proudly and led them to her small home. When they met Amina, they were amazed by her calmness and grace. She didn't act proud or excited. She spoke politely, her voice soft but full of confidence. One of the officials said, "Amina, your courage and wisdom have inspired many across the country. We want to give you a scholarship to study abroad." The villagers clapped and cheered. Amina stood there, surprised, her eyes filling with tears. All her life she had been told she was worthless, cursed, and unwanted, and now the whole world saw her differently. That evening, as the sun set, the villagers gathered to say goodbye. Amina was leaving for a new life, a future she never thought possible. People who once ignored her now lined up to shake her hand. Then, through the crowd, Zubaida appeared. Her face was pale, her eyes full of regret. She walked up to Amina and suddenly fell to her knees, crying in front of everyone. "Please, Amina," she begged, her voice breaking, "forgive me for everything I did." The whole village watched in silence. Amina didn't speak a single word. Instead, she reached into her bag and handed Zubaida a small folded note. With trembling hands, Zubaida opened it and read the words written inside, "The truth always burns brighter than lies." Amina turned, her white scarf fluttering in the wind, and stepped into the car waiting for her. As it drove away, the villagers stood still, watching her go. They knew they were witnessing something powerful, a girl once called cursed now leaving as a symbol of truth, courage, and grace. Many years passed, and life in the little village slowly changed. The market had been rebuilt, new families had moved in, and people no longer spoke much about the painful past. The story of Amina had become a distant memory, something the elders whispered about when telling tales to children. The village had gone back to its quiet, dusty rhythm. But one hot afternoon, everything changed. The sound of shiny black cars echoed through the narrow road, and the villagers rushed out to see who had come. The cars stopped right in front of the old chief's house, and when the door opened, everyone froze in disbelief. Amina stepped out. She was no longer the thin girl in rags they once pitied and mocked. She was dressed in a graceful gown, confident and calm, with a warm smile that carried years of peace. Cameras followed her as she waved at the stunned villagers. They whispered her name in awe, their hearts pounding with shame and wonder. Word spread quickly, Amina had returned, not as a victim, but as a successful, educated humanitarian. She had come back to build a school for orphaned and abandoned girls, so no child would ever suffer the way she did. The next morning, people gathered around as the land was cleared for construction. Amina worked beside them, greeting everyone kindly, never once showing bitterness. Old faces, those who once called her cursed, now bowed their heads and wiped away tears. Some fell to their knees, begging for her forgiveness. But Amina only smiled gently and said, "Let's build something beautiful together." Her kindness broke every heart that had once turned against her. When the school building began to rise, the village finally understood the meaning of grace. The same girl they had once rejected had come back as their savior, not with anger or revenge, but with love and purpose. That day, everyone in Kaduna knew that true greatness is not in punishing others, but in returning light to the very place that once tried to put it out. The day the new school was finally completed, the whole village gathered to celebrate. The building stood tall and bright, painted in soft colors that glowed under the warm Kaduna sun. Children ran around laughing, their voices filling the air with joy. Banners waved, drums played, and people sang songs of pride. In the middle of all the happiness, Amina stood quietly in front of the gate, watching the girls who would soon learn there. Her heart was full. She had dreamed of this moment for years, not for fame or praise, but to give other girls the chance she never had. Then, through the crowd, an old woman appeared. She walked slowly, leaning on a stick, her body weak and trembling. It was Zubaida. Her hair was gray, her eyes tired, and her face marked by regret. When she saw Amina standing there, dressed in white and smiling, her knees gave way. She began to cry, tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. The crowd fell silent. No one moved. Everyone knew their story. Zubaida whispered, her voice shaking, "Amina, I don't deserve your kindness. I destroyed your life." Amina stepped forward, her eyes soft and calm. She gently took Zubaida's hand and helped her stand. The villagers watched closely, waiting to see what Amina would do. With a faint smile, Amina looked into her stepmother's eyes and said, "You burned my clothes, but not my purpose." Her words were quiet, but they carried through the entire crowd like a wave. For a long moment, no one spoke. The chief wiped his eyes. Women began to cry. Even the children felt the power of her forgiveness. Zubaida sobbed harder and held Amina's hand tightly, whispering thank you over and over. That moment changed everything. From that day forward, no one spoke Amina's name with pity or doubt again, they spoke it with love, pride, and respect. The girl they once called cursed had become a living lesson of grace, proving that forgiveness can heal wounds deeper than any fire ever could. The school Amina built soon became the pride of the entire region. People from far and near came to see it, calling it Light of Kaduna. It was more than just a school, it was a symbol of hope, forgiveness, and strength. The walls were painted bright white, and the classrooms were filled with books, laughter, and dreams. Every corner of the building carried a piece of Amina's heart. On the front wall, written in bold letters, were her words, "Education is the fire that gives light, not the one that burns." Those words reminded everyone of what she had been through and how she had turned her pain into purpose. The girls who studied there were not ordinary students, they were orphans, abandoned children, and girls who once had no voice. Amina gave them uniforms, food, and love. She sat with them, told them stories, and taught them how to believe in themselves. Whenever she spoke, the children listened with wide eyes, amazed by the woman who had survived so much yet carried no hate in her heart. She often said, "Forgiveness makes you stronger than revenge ever could." Her calm voice and gentle smile inspired everyone who met her. Every year, on the anniversary of the school's opening, people gathered from different towns to hear Amina's story. The villagers, government officials, journalists, and even travelers came to see the woman who turned suffering into strength. She would stand before them, simple and graceful, sharing how truth and courage had guided her path. The crowd always fell silent, some crying, others nodding in respect. Over time, Light of Kaduna became more than just a building, it became a movement. Girls who once felt forgotten began to dream again. Many went on to become teachers, nurses, and leaders, all carrying a piece of Amina's light with them. The school stood tall not just as a place of learning, but as a living reminder that no matter how dark life gets, one brave heart can bring light to an entire world. The morning of the school's grand opening was bright and peaceful. The entire village buzzed with excitement as people gathered to witness the moment they had once thought impossible. Children held small flags, drums beat softly, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. When Amina arrived, everyone turned to look. She stepped out of the car wearing a white flowing gown that shimmered in the sunlight. The gown wasn't just beautiful, it carried meaning. White stood for purity, peace, and forgiveness, everything Amina had become. Her smile was calm, her eyes kind, and she moved with quiet grace, as if every step told a story of survival and faith. The chief gave a speech about her bravery, and even the elders who once doubted her spoke with pride. "This girl," the chief said, "is the true light of Kaduna." The villagers, who had once mocked her, now clapped and sang her name. Some wiped tears from their eyes. They remembered the cruel things they had said about her years ago, and their hearts filled with shame and gratitude. But Amina didn't look back in anger. She greeted everyone warmly, thanking them for being part of the new beginning. In the crowd, standing quietly at the back, was Zubaida. Time had changed her, her face was lined, her eyes weary, her spirit humbled. As the people cheered, she slowly walked toward Amina, trembling. When she reached her, she held Amina's hand tightly and whispered through tears, "You were never cursed, Amina. You were chosen." Amina looked at her stepmother with a gentle smile and nodded. She didn't speak a word, but her eyes said everything, she had forgiven her long ago. The crowd watched in silence, moved by the power of that moment. For the first time, they understood what true strength looked like. It wasn't loud or proud, it was quiet, soft, and full of love. That day, Amina's white gown wasn't just a dress. It was a symbol of peace that washed away years of pain, leaving only light behind. The crowd fell silent as Amina stood in front of the shining new school. The sunlight touched her face, and her white gown fluttered in the gentle wind. Cameras flashed from every direction, capturing the moment that had taken years of pain, courage, and faith to reach. Children surrounded her, clapping and cheering, their voices filling the air with joy. The same villagers who once called her cursed now looked at her with awe and deep respect. They had seen her journey, from a girl in rags to a woman of grace and power. Amina looked around at the faces before her, the chief, the elders, the children, and even Zubaida, who stood crying softly in the crowd. Then she raised her hand for silence and spoke in a calm, steady voice that carried across the schoolyard. "No one can destroy what destiny has written." Her words were simple, but they hit every heart like a wave. It was not a statement of pride, it was a truth born from years of pain, survival, and forgiveness. The people listened quietly, many wiping away tears. They realized that true strength is not found in revenge or anger, but in rising above hate. Amina had every reason to be bitter, yet she chose peace. Every eye in the crowd followed her as she turned toward the children, kneeling to hug a small girl in uniform. That single act said more than any speech ever could. As the ceremony ended, the chief said, "Today, Amina's story becomes our lesson." And he was right. From that day forward, no one in the village ever mistook kindness for weakness again. They had learned that real power lives in forgiveness, and that the light of truth, once revealed, can never be put out.